Hey everybody, welcome to the third episode of the New to You show in our installment of Music with Musicians or whatever. There's no real title to this. So we're continuing again our theme of music with musicians. I guess we said that already, but the idea being that we are talking about music by people who have created music and then inspiration or things that sort of have affected them from other people in music. So I'm your host this week, John Holt. With me is
Billy Hartong
and
Parker Silzer
and Adam Moerder.
All right. Just a quick intro on everybody. Willem and me go back for years and years. He was part of our film festival group and is still one of the core members. And you've heard a couple tracks of his throughout the podcast. He was the one who did God in Training, which I've used as a segue segment, and I've also used a track that he helped put together, which was Jesus Song, which was
You have?
John Denver's.
I love that.
What was this? What was the track? Almost Heaven, West Virginia,
Right.
Blue Ridge Mountains, Shenandoah River. Life is. What's the name of that track? Country Roads.
Country Roads.
Okay. So,
Okay, yeah.
so it's Country Roads, but we rethemed it to be Christian.
That's a
Like,
great
Holy
story
Lord,
too. Do you remember
take
we
me
loaded
up.
that up to the internet and it hit the top 10 of the.
It was a top 10 on a Christian music website for a
Really?
while. And
It
it's
was
like, it gets to the point where it's like,
People are going to die.
yeah, you're
For
gonna
the sinners, you're
gonna
gonna burn
go
in hell.
You get to sit up with Jesus and watch all the
And we
sinners
were
down in
kind of
hell.
joking. Apparently, people really connected.
They
to
were.
that.
we just made a connection there. So
Wow.
That's still Gus's favorite song.
it's a good one. So Parker is a coworker of mine in my current job. He is one of the music engineers and writers for the studio. And Adam worked with me at my previous job. He wrote scripts for a number of the series that I worked on. And yeah. So and this week the pick is on Adam's plate. So we've introduced a lot, so we'll just jump right in and pass it along to Adam.
All right. Today I brought in Fringy Slider. It's a song from the new Mr. Dream album. Mr. Dream's the name of the band I'm in. And that album is forthcoming. It'll be out around February of 2014. And it'll be called The Ultimate in Luxury on God Mode, a Brooklyn-run label. And I basically just picked the song because it's kind of one of the newest songs I've done. It was written and recorded basically like last April and May, and like kind of mixed between then and September, October. And then actually it was we had uploaded it on SoundCloud and did not even mean to release it, but someone from Stereogum found it and it wasn't totally made private, so they took the SoundCloud embed and just were like, hey, this new song's out. And took us a little bit off guard, but we just sort of went with it. And it's basically, unofficially the first single, I guess, from this next album. But I picked it too because it's pretty different from our previous material. We used to be a lot like louder, heavier punkier band. We're a 3-piece, and this next record's kind of transitional a little bit, and we're moving into more kind of I don't know, for lack of a better word, like dancier groove bass music, and yeah, so this is sort of somewhere in between. I think we've had a lot of weird comparisons with this song. Some say it sounds like Franz Ferdinand, or I forget what other weird ones we've had. But yeah, I think we're just kind of going for just trying to move away from your typical like power chordy like sound, or just in general like typical like folk arrangements or rock arrangements. So yeah, I don't know. That's the deal with that song.
All right. Well, I'll throw it to reactions before I throw any questions out there.
Sure.
Willem, what were your sort of thoughts or reactions to?
Well, when I was initially listening to it, I was thinking about the song on the back end, which I knew, which was the Pixies tune, and I'm glad that Adam said that, because there was, I was hearing elements of it, but it was a little tamer than perhaps I was expecting. But now that he put it in that context, I understand it. But there was definitely more of a groove than a hammer, so to speak. So I dug it. It was cool.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm familiar with some of your other stuff just because it got passed around the internet. But yeah, no, I was really into this. I mean, I think that lately in some circles, there's been like a nice, from both ends of the spectrum, from both the very electronic side, starting to incorporate more natural sounding things and some more rock elements. If you think about the new Daft Punk album, or Dark Side.
Yeah.
And then on the other side, a lot of these people who are a little bit fed up, like me, with the whole like 90s revivalism thing, which is just like a lot of people rehashing songs that were only okay to begin with. There's been a move in that circle too to sort of like incorporate the grooves and the energy of dance or of like krautrock and stuff like that. So I'm really behind that movement. So I thought it was really cool. It was nice to like hear you guys evolving that way. Yeah, so like I mentioned it to you off mic before, but there's a band that I think you should check out called The Embarrassment, which actually Jonah from Shampoo, who your drummer recorded, told me about. And they're just sort of like have like a great groove a lot of the time, but still sort of like spastic and punk. They have this amazing cover of Don't Stop Till You Get Enough by Michael Jackson, which is just brings it into another dimension entirely. So yeah, I mean, I was into it, and I'm also just a sucker for those beautiful but off kilter chords that you kind of have in that breakdown section where you're just like strumming one at a time. That's like kind of the harmony sound that naturally appeals to me. So yeah, cool. I was really into the track.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think you know, not to kind of criticize any particular sort of music, but I think we were all, the band was sort of feeling like we were at the end of our rope with a certain sound, and we needed to just significantly change it and to feel like fresh again and inspired. And I think like it's funny because we're already working primarily on like a bunch of new material for like yet another album. But I'm excited for this Ultimate Luxury album to come out, because I think it'll be I don't know, it'll be a side of us that people aren't familiar with, and yeah, I'm just excited for people to hear it.
So there's a question: if you had the opportunity, like, do you think you would have picked one of the current songs you're working on versus this song if
they had recorded versions of it?
If recorded, you think,
right?
Like it's just the latest thing, maybe
Probably.
the thing that is just sort of most attractive right now, or
yeah, I mean, it's funny too, because this song in particular isn't even the most like best example of like our new sound or something. It's just when it's finished. But and actually I would have even considered bringing in a totally unmixed, unmastered demo of a solo project I've been working on. That is basically, that project is called, it's just me, but it's called Fitness, and it's all like very electronic, kind of in the like 9 Inch Nails or The Knife, which is like a Swedish electronic group. something in that area. And it's very like a lot of like heavily affected vocals and just sort of weird lyrics about like health and body and that sort of thing. But which I'm excited about, but is like in its early stages. Just again, and that was actually, that whole project is, besides like any musical goals or something that I have with that, I'm also just been, the past year or two probably, been trying to teach myself Logic and how to record and mix, and even if I can just get something to a demo stage and then take it to Nick Sylvester, who runs God Mode and is the drummer in our band and does all our mixing and production, take it to him, and then we'll like, get a good version of it out. But yeah, and it's all just sort of like, I mean, I listen to a lot of different types of music, and as I'm sure everyone does, but it was getting to the point where I'm like, like Pixies or Nirvana or so and so, like I listen to a lot more. Like I can't pinpoint one of them and say, well, this is what I want to sound like, and this is what all our music's going to sound like from here on out. So I feel like I've just been trying to give myself options, and whatever type of music I'm inspired to do, I can do a total like 180 turn and do it.
It's almost sort of like I feel like I've been noticing a little bit of a shift back towards the DFA vibe. I feel like we're kind of coming up on the anniversary of that sound, sort of the integration of like sort of punk and minimal, but like with disco-y kind of feel too. And that's really cool. I mean, I'm into that being a thing that can be re-explored in this time with like the latest technology that's available to everyone and stuff. So
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love like a lot of stuff on DFA records, and especially like a lot of the groups that they're inspired by. And
yeah, we had, I mean, our last EP, which the song that we played last week was not off of. That's not our most recent thing, but the guy who mixed it used to work at DFA, and I definitely, even though it's like still very sort of hard-hitting, driving punk kind of thing, I kind of wanted to bring in a little bit of that mindset, which is one of the reasons I asked him to get involved with the project. Mm-hmm. I think it's cool.
Cool, thank you.
So kind of reaching back, when did you guys start Mr. Dream?
So Mr. Dream started in about spring summer of 2008, and I'd say we actually became like a functioning band a year later, like spring of 2009. I think we did our first show, and we're like writing songs and stuff. And our first album came out. We did a few EPs. One was like pretty bad. One was okay. And then our full length debut was spring of 2011. That was called Trash Hit. And we did like a little bit of touring around it with some other groups. And then we released an EP February 2012, and or maybe it was March, one of those months. And that was called Fatherland EP, and we toured again. And since then, we've basically been working on recording stuff. And yeah, as I said, we should have a lot coming out soon.
So, and I mean, I don't know if this is just because the sample tends to bring it about, but you're the third kind of musician we have on, also a songwriter, and you sing for a lot of your tracks. Is that
yeah?
right?
Actually, on the new album, I'll sing lead vocals for all of them.
Okay, and play guitar.
Mm-hmm.
So this is kind of interesting. Like all three of you guys were in 3-piece sets.
I didn't realize that until you said that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's sort of, I mean, that these kind of coincidences always show up or whatever, or they're planned. But do you guys find that's a good level of, I mean, why aren't you the Beatles? Why aren't there four of you?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Like why, I guess starting with you, Adam, and if anyone else wants to chime in on this, why three? And is that sort of become normative, or has that always been sort of like falling back onto that, or what are your thoughts on that?
Right. Well, I think originally it was just we wanted to have a very simple arrangement because we weren't sure that we could A, play our instruments, and B, like even write songs at all, let alone like some for like many instruments. So and we just like, there wasn't a fourth person who we were like, oh, and we should totally be in a band with that person. That made, like, at the time made total sense. So yeah, and I think like we were up to the challenge of seeing how much you could do with just 3 instruments and 1 or 2 singers at a time. And yeah, I mean, obviously, like if you need a second guitar, you either hire someone or lay down another track in the studio. So, yeah, that's about it. And it's actually funny you asked this because we're now thinking about expanding and having people to play live. Because the thing I've noticed, or from bands I've talked to who have 4 or more people and only 1 or 2 principal songwriters, what tends to happen is that they are basically the other people are basically session players anyways. You know, like you have a keyboardist in a band where the bass player, the guitarist is the lead singer. That keyboardist is just like, yeah, I'm just pressing like a couple chords here and there. And that's it. And then I don't say anything in practice or whatever. Which can happen. I'm not saying that always happens, but that tends to be like the dynamic as you get larger and larger. I mean, it's still always like a small group, 1 or 2 or maybe 3 or 4.
Well, I mean, when I was in high school, the bands to be in were ska bands, and you're talking like minimum 10-piece sets.
Oh yeah, totally.
And that was it. Like, so everybody who could play an instrument was probably in a band, and it was probably a ska band because it's, you know, the skank riffs are easy to play, and they always need a 14th trombone player. So
right. Well, I used to play trombone. It's like you are useless, except for a marching band, basically, if you play trombone or a ska band. So like ska comes along, and you're like, "Here's my ticket out of here."
So yeah, let me before we kind of jump back onto talking with Adam. What about you guys with 3 pieces and how you fell into that? I guess.
Well, I mean, in the Song Dongerson's case, the first recordings that we did, it was just Dylan and I in Dylan's basement, and it was like I was playing guitar, he was playing bass, we had like a drum machine, and it just seemed like we didn't really need anything else. And then we got our old friend Zach, who was around anyway, to play drums, which was kind of funny because he's an exceptional guitarist, but we kind of just wanted a drummer, so he kind of just pushed through and got his drum chops up a little bit. But yeah, I mean, similar to what Adam was saying, it was kind of like who was around and also who was in the mindset. You know, we've talked here and there about adding another person or moving Zach to guitar and getting another drummer or whatever, various things. But, you know, like we work really well together creatively, the 3 of us, with like the push and pull, and it ends up working out in the end. And I don't want to have someone just in rotating through and always like every couple
like a Ringo.
I don't want yeah. I mean, if we could find a 4th person who
had no talent,
who was technically
like
proficient, really like technically proficient, but you know, opinionless. Right. And also very committed.
Good luck with that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's the thing. You know, if you want someone who can play all the parts that you're asking them to play,
you're like a technician or something.
Won't question it, but also really has a lot of heart. I mean, that's almost impossible to find, and I feel like.
Well, do they need it? Like, if they're a robot, like a machine, and you can just say like, "Hey, you're gonna play and go." Would you rather someone with heart or someone who's a machine and could just do it?
Here's the thing.
How important are human emotions?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
because I'm building an Asperger's drummer in the basement.
So many bands right now that I see play live, and a lot of them are really good, but they play to a backing track. You know, they're playing along with a metronome and with keyboards happening, and maybe even with other guitar parts happening, and they're really great performers, really great at their instruments, or in some cases, really great songwriters, but that's not really the kind of like constraint that we're interested in having, you know, playing to a track and having a song be a set length like that. So I think in our instance, if we were to ever add another member, it would have to be someone who is able to like kind of go with the flow.
Yeah, and I think for your band especially, those songs would not make sense with a either a drum machine or pre-recorded track.
Yeah.
Like it's such like such a like organic you know, analog sound. So yeah, I totally hear where you're coming from.
And what about you guys? How did you fall into 3?
Well, I started out in 5, went to 4, ended up in 3. That's basically high school, college, and then after that, we we started as three. We played that way for a while. We had a fourth for a little while, and then it just became clear that we didn't necessarily need it with what we could do. You know, we've always thought 3 bodies, 6 hands, simple yet as complicated as we could get it, or as complicated as we wanted it to be. I can tell you, as a 3-piece touring, it's a hell of a lot easier than a 5-piece.
Mm-hmm.
It's one less person you have to find in the morning. And 3's, you know, 3's a good number too. Band votes, there's gonna be a majority. 4 people, you get deadlocked, you got a problem. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a choice. It simply just happened.
All right.
But yeah, there are times, it's a double-edged sword though. There are times where you're like, man, I wish we had someone who could do that. And, you know, a lot of 3-pieces who end up doing really well, I mean, Nirvana being probably the most, they end up hiring someone, like Pat Smear was. You know, I don't know if you know a band called Guster. They now have 2 people who join them on stage. So I think the 3-piece is just a vehicle, and then when you have to create in a bigger room, it's not unusual to hire musicians.
Yeah, it's kind of the separation of live and
Sure.
and recorded that we were talking about a couple weeks ago. When the version of the band that goes into record can totally be it's think about like Talking Heads doing their Stop Making Sense tour, where they had like a gospel choir and like 4 guitarists and a horn section and all sorts of craziness, and there's really only 4 people in that band, and you could argue that probably fewer than that were contributing to songwriting. So yeah, it definitely is. It frees you once you let go of that and you're like, well, if we need to, we can figure out a live show, or vice versa, we can figure out the recorded, you know, aspect of it. So,
and then there are bands that just do both. I think Rush is a pretty good example of that. I never had anyone else on stage, and they do a pretty darn good show.
yeah.
So I guess jumping back into Mr. Dream, Adam, would you like, I guess, writing wise, because I know like Nick and you both are sort of like, like you're saying, he's got technical chops as well,
Right.
But and he's the drummer for you guys.
That's correct. Yeah.
You guys both wrote for Pitchfork for a little while.
We used to do music criticism. I haven't done it in about 4 or 5 years, but and Nick maybe even longer than that. But yeah, which is interesting. I mean, it's kind of a lot more different than you'd maybe think initially. Like, I know, aside from just simply like learning a lot about music while doing it, which is great, and discovering bands and everything, both new and old, it doesn't at all help you in terms of like writing a song. It's not like you can say like, oh, this is a thing that's trendy and will take off. I know that because like I used to review albums or something. It just doesn't work that way from what I've found. And it definitely like weirds a lot of people out, I think, even though a lot of musicians have been, like the lead singer Yo La Tango used to like be a music writer and stuff.
Saint Etienne, I think they were.
Yeah, I think Steve Albini from Big Black and Shellac and all those groups used to do it too. And it's I mean, like I was not at all. I did it in college to like make money or to like be able to do laundry, basically. I was not like a professional. I mean, yeah, by any stretch of the.
Well, it's also,
word.
I mean, it's probably early like website. Right,
yeah, it was
too,
just
so
like, oh, here's like a random
like,
band from Montana.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
writing
review
for
them.
Entertainment Weekly or Rolling Stone, or
Right.
some like
Although
prestigious.
now I'd say that Pitchfork
Yeah.
has replaced
right.
Rolling Stone entirely. Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I guess we're kind of talking.
But at the
earlier,
time,
right?
yeah, because I started in 2005, and Pitchfork's traffic is a small fraction than what it is now. But yeah, so it's sort of weird. It doesn't really help at all. It's made me like incredibly wary of current or of any music writing, because one of the most annoying things about criticism is that it just intentional fallacy. It assumes that like the musician is going for this sort of thing thematically or sonically or whatever, stylistically. That's just not there, or it just totally omits major aspects of the recording of an album. Like, it doesn't mention like the writer probably maybe doesn't know anything about the process either musically or technically of making an album, and sort of like glosses over it, and it's like, well, this is an album about loss, and this is like, we don't think that this conveyed well, or something like that. And it's like, well, you're not talking like, what does the album sound like, what what are the instruments on it, that sort of thing. But at the same time, it's just, I'm not at all trying to rag on that, on music criticism. It's totally an important thing. And it's not like, oh, you have to be in a successful band to be able to write about it or something like that. But yeah, it's a very difficult thing. And I don't know. That's probably what's influenced me most, being both a writer and musician.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to a certain extent is like, what can you write other than like, I like this or I don't personally, and I guess you just have to have like a platform, like people just have to like trust the platform that they're reading and know that up till this point they've not been led astray by the recommendations. They have similar tastes or whatever.
Right.
The problem is just when things get so big that they're like sort of the default, and they have so much sway because of their scale that there aren't a whole lot of alternative opinions with the same amount of reach and power and resources, and then that gets kind of frustrating because it gets harder for smaller people to get noticed or to get into like an opinion, because you feel like every blog is just recycling sort of the same talking points
Right.
that this major blog or this major publication has already laid out.
So at a certain point, it becomes what you
Almost
make.
monopoly,
Right.
sort of.
Yeah, there's like
in a monopoly
this
of opinion.
monoculture wants to live, and it's going to live whether it's top down from Rolling Stone or this like edgy new website Pitchfork comes along and then just basically promotes its own like monoculture in its place, and it's like,
I mean,
it's
I guess
just funny how
it's
that
odd
works.
to me that you wouldn't have a. I mean, we were getting a little off on a tangent with the music critique, but you wouldn't have individuals coming up as, look, I'm the guy who goes out and finds obscure music in this genre and writes about it. And if you like what I like and like what I'm critiquing, this is what I'm seeking and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's odd that you don't have just more of those individuals popping up and almost more like focus.
Well, I mean, you do have those individuals popping up, but like, going to tons of shows and having bands record at your facilities or throwing huge festivals, I mean, all that takes a lot of like money and power and resources. And like, I think most people, it's hard to even compete. I mean, you can write about an individual record on your blog and be very thoughtful, but who's going to pay attention if you don't have the latest music videos and the latest news? And
if you're powerful enough to cram a band down the listener's throat,
Right.
which
Yeah.
is, I mean,
Which
you
happens.
get them on festival bills, you can get them touring with a even
But I guess
larger
I
artist.
guess that's what I wonder, though. I mean, since we've broken away from like radio is dying or whatever you want to call it, and TV presentation on VH1 and or MTV is effectively dead.
but there's YouTube.
Right, but I guess anyone can have a channel, and so why can't someone like? I guess that's it. I guess what I'm wondering is, why hasn't someone like started a wormhole service where you like this, go down this direction, like.
Well, there is. I mean, if you
I
think
don't
about
know.
like Pandora or any sort of like algorithmic recommendations based thing where theoretically they're just saying you like this stuff, therefore you would probably like this. We're just gonna give it to you as it is. If you end up liking
Right.
Yes and you always thought that you hated Yes because they were over the top or whatever, like, sorry dude, you like Yes.
Right.
And that's cool, and you can seek those things out, but in terms of like blowing up big bands or making bands recognized, that's not, I don't know if that's going to get the job done. You need like influencers. That's sort of like the key component.
It's weird too. I mean, with critics and print and media, I don't know. Aside from, I don't know how instrumental that is in determining a band's fate. I think I've always looked at it as a way to get a couple quotes to put in the EPK and just move on. And you know, Pitchfork, I think, was probably one of the first ones that had a lot of influence, and probably for very good reason. But you know, coming from the outside, publicity is just a strange beast. Because it costs money, you know, and money is what gets you into the network. Not always dependent upon, you know, who you are. The best thing that can happen, though, is, you know, someone inside one of those networks finds you and wants to do you solid, either because they like you or they like what you're doing. I mean, at the end of the day, though, man, I mean, for certain bands on certain levels, yeah, maybe, you know, if, like, I don't know, the big major releases get panned one way or the other, that's going to affect sales. But it basically doesn't make that big of a difference to bands sort of in the middle of the road. I've read all sorts of reviews of my stuff, and I've read maybe 2 or 3 that I really felt got it, and that doesn't mean that they were glowing. In fact, one really wasn't, but I'm like, that's fair, I get it. And then you realize, hey, this is one person, and they're trying not to be one person, but they still are. So, you know, it is what it is. But then I think a lot of musicians and bands make that mistake too. They get one big review and they're quitting their job and getting tattoos. You're like, dude, that's not how it works.
Yeah, you have a lot more work ahead of you if you want to.
I mean, I will say, I've been pleasantly surprised since moving to Brooklyn about how much like the music does actually matter to people. And, you know, like, things take money and connections and stuff, and you have to, like, be willing to work for those. But, you know, people will start getting behind you if, like, you're working really hard and you believe in your music, and if you're doing something a little bit different. And even if it's on a very small scale. But, I mean, it's happened to us a little bit, and I've seen it really happen to friends already over the course of a year. So, you know, there is the money and, like, the handshakes and stuff, but that's just part of it. Like, in the end, like, what's drawing everybody there is, like, really, like, the passion about the music. So it's cool that that's important to people. Yeah, it was surprising.
That's the best review you can get. It's from the music fan to their friends. That's how shit happens.
So then let's seg into, from being a writer, into how do you write your music and that process for you, especially like as it relates to, say, this song, which is a little, you know, later in your canon.
Yeah, I mean, I think usually an idea will be brought in, and it'll be as simple as like a bass line or a guitar riff or something like that, and we'll kind of like jam on it a little bit and try to kind of go from there. I mean, it's never the same process necessarily each time, but yeah, and then usually I tend to be the one who like kind of comes in and organizes it, probably because I'm singing and I need to like kind of graft a like melody onto this what's at that point like an amorphous like musical piece. But yeah, so like that's, I don't know, that's more or less the process. It's usually like vocals last, and though not always the case. Sometimes there's like an idea or an attitude or an emotion or something that we know it needs. But yeah, that's usually how we work. And I feel like everyone contributes a little bit, and it's not like it's definitely like not just me. It's not just 2 people. I feel like everyone at some point is like, oh, I'm going to try this bass line, or I'm going to try this drum pattern or something. So yeah, it's usually how it works. And then my own material, sometimes actually I'll take something that we jam on and then throw away, and I'll realize it works a lot better as like an electronic song somehow or something like that. For whatever reason, like the particular instruments just excuse me, too many chips. The particular instruments just don't make any sense or something. I don't know, it just like doesn't sound as good. But then you like put it in a certain synthesizer and you're like, oh, that sounds kind of good now.
Do you guys what's the editing process? Do you record everything as you sort of jam?
We'll record like on a phone, and
we do that too. I love that. The voice memo, it's amazing.
It's so it's like all you need.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll do that, and then like go back and listen to them, and I'll even be like walking to work or in the gym or somewhere listening to it where like I'm kind of distracted a little bit, but not really, and I'll like just sort of think about the song and think about like structure or melody ideas or something like that over it. So
I feel, yeah, same. Like at the end of the night, walking home from a party, I'll be like wasted and be like singing into my iPhone this melody that just occurred to me as I'm walking down the street. It's so awesome to have it be so simple.
yeah.
Yeah.
I used to buy the like little recorders.
Yeah.
That would constantly break.
Olympus?
I think so. Yeah.
That's what I use.
Mm-hmm. They were good, but they're no iPhone.
So had you been in a band before this one?
I was in a band that mainly did cover songs in high school, and then college. I had this just weird period where I didn't really play a lot of music. I think I played as like a joke. I'd play with friends for like certain parties or stuff like that. But it was like we'd play like 4 or 5 songs, and it would be covers, and it'd be terrible. But yeah, and then I got into it again once I moved to New York and got a day job, and I was like, oh, this is terrible. I need to find something fun to do. Yeah.
Cool. So what kind of led you to pick this song specifically, like in the...
For my own song or for the inspirations?
For your own song first, and then we'll jump right into inspiration.
Yeah, I just think it's... I think I picked it just because it's pretty new, and I feel like it's more reflective of where I'm at, like mentally with music, than my older stuff. I mean, I don't know if it's the best song or anything like that I've ever worked on, but yeah, I feel like I'd be able to talk about it way more than like stuff that was released almost 3 years ago that I would kind of be like, yeah, I don't really know what I was thinking.
All right, so we lost Willem. Sorry, took a little pause there. But Adam, you also brought your inspirational track or whatever, however you want to categorize it.
I did, and to clarify, this wasn't at all an inspiration to the song I brought in of my own. In fact, it's actually like a reaction against that inspiration a little bit. But no, I brought in the Pixies because I brought in Bone Machine by the Pixies because I had remember hearing this when I was, I don't know, probably like 14 or so. And I was big into a lot of the same bands that probably everyone was into as like a suburban kid in the 90s, like REM and Nirvana and like Pearl Jam and Foo Fighters, stuff like that. And I just remember digging deeper like a little bit. And this is when the internet and Amazon started to get good at their little like algorithmic stuff. And they're like, if you like this, you like this. And I remember going on like fan boards of Nirvana and Foo Fighters and stuff. And people were mentioning the Pixies a lot. And I remember buying like Doolittle, and I totally hated it at first, which is probably just a product of me being so used to like the big booming like 90s alternative rock production. It's like so like tough and in your face, and everything's like massive and distorted, and all the vocalists are these like Eddie Vedder-esque like or Kurt Cobain-esque like screamers and like really like gruff voices and stuff. So it took me a while, and then I heard Surfer Rosa, and like that's more when things like kind of snapped for me, and it just broadened. At that time, I was just like so into the same like white rock music, and not that Pixies. I mean, obviously they're also white and very indie rocky, but it just was like very like theatrical. It was like very weird. The verse is just him like telling this dumb weird story that makes no sense. The guitars are like very piercing and loud, and not like they don't do kind of your typical like power chord Green Day Nirvana move. Yeah, just everything about it was just like so strange, but also like totally a catchy song. And not not like some avant-garde thing at all. So that's basically why I picked it, because I feel like it influenced me at a time when I myself was like starting to get into terrible high school bands, and and kind of again when I formed my current band after college. We sort of like revisited bands like this, who like, it's not that I forgot about them, but it's just in college you're all like, I gotta find like the weirdest stuff from like Germany in the 60s or whatever, as opposed to being, and then like all the stuff you loved is like somehow like passe at that time or something like that. So yeah, that's basically why I picked them. And like we certainly don't sound very much like them anymore. We're like, there was a time where we did, I think, and we were just like, hey, you know what, we sound like the Pixies, but like a not nearly as good version. Let's move on to something else. Yeah, but I always like appreciate, I still think there are things, just like, as I said, like the different vocal moves he does are still like very influential. I mean, I think it's similar to like David Byrne too, where you know, there's like singing, but pop singing, and there's rock singing, but then there's also like the kind of weird yelps or weird like screaming things, and not, you know, just like all sort of those, and spoken word, and you know, stuff like that. So yeah, it's still very important to me, and just the arrangement stuff they did with guitars too. They just do really simple, like a guitar playing one note really high, like on repeat. It's like is very interesting and mind blowing when you're used to the like guitar magazine rock that I was in the 90s, where I'm like, Rage Against the Machine, like you gotta have the bass and guitar playing the same thing all the time. You gotta have like 8 effects on it and be like absolutely huge. So yeah, that's basically why I picked this song, and this one in particular, because it's just like, I think a great mix of like a pop or a rock song and like it just totally weird, like goofing around indie bullshit.
So Parker, had you heard Surfer Rosa before?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I'm a fan of the Pixies. I still haven't like really like gone through their discography like song by song, album by album. But yeah, I mean, I love the Pixies. They're like.
When do you think you first heard this album or this song even specifically?
I mean, I think this is on the Greatest Hits, right? Is this on like the Wave of Mutilation?
Oh, well, I owned all the albums, so I don't know.
That's a tough one.
No, it almost
that's
certainly.
where I started.
It almost certainly is on there.
So that's probably when I heard it. You know, like I listened to the Pixies and I liked them enough, but I was definitely like, when I first started listening to them, way into the more kind of 60s pop referencing stuff that they do occasionally, like Here Comes Your Man.
Yeah, which I hated that song, and I was like, I'm never gonna like this group. When I was like 14.
Yeah.
But like now I'm like, yeah, I appreciate it.
See, that was one of the first things I was drawn to, because I came very much from like a Beatles, Kinks,
right,
sort of like orchestrated poppy, Velvet Underground kind of thing before I got into this kind of stuff. But now, yeah, I mean, now I like a lot of their kind of quirkier things too. But I mean, my favorite Pixies stuff is still like the driving, like epic Wave of Mutilation and like Debaser and
Digging for Fire,
just like those. Yeah, Letter to Memphis, like just like those like big hooks and subversive hooks, you know. Yeah. They have like these gems, and they kind of like they hide them a little bit. And that's cool.
Our path for this, I mean, this was one, you know, these guys were on the radio and on MTV when I was in high school, like early high school or whatever. So that was it. Like we had all their cassettes. We would just drive around and listen to Pixies, Lemonheads, and I don't know, maybe The Cure a little bit, but you know, just like that. And then get into more Leonard Cohen and like some real thinking music or whatever.
Yeah.
But you know, like Ween and Primus and like those guys were there, but then this was sort of, it's almost like there are parts of it that are almost like sillier in some ways, which is kind of nice. Like it's like the fun alternative stuff.
Yeah.
It's still like meaty and really enjoyable.
I mean, I think it's really important for bands to have a sense of humor, which, I mean, my band name is fucking Slunk Dockerson, so yeah. But like, yeah, I mean, I think when that gets too lost, like, I mean, it's cool when a band's like has a really refined aesthetic and are super like calculated, and that can work in an awesome way and just be like a visual and and everything, and it's tight. But I think a lot of my bands are just kind of looser than that, and like are really having fun, and it's not too separated from like the foundation of rock music, which is like joyous and like an adolescent, but not in like a cheap or like silly way, like in touch with that like energy that you have when you're younger, and keeping it alive.
This album, right, debuted in '88. So, I mean, that's like a pretty, like, that's kind of like right in the beginning of that sort of alternative indie rock, right?
Well, I mean, I think that's like the threshold, you know? So, like, you had, like, Pixies who are, like, following in the footsteps of Husker Du or whatever, and then you have people like Nirvana and all those guys who are sort of following in the footsteps of, like, Pixies and Dinosaur Jr., and that's, like, the era that broke big. So, I mean, I think that's an interesting time, because like Pixies is sort of where you have like the good production that was going to come later, but also sort of the more left field songwriting, which was indicative of what came earlier. So it's like very, really interesting.
Yeah, and I think they were way more popular in England than here, to the point where like they would have been a totally recognizable name. I think if you were like our age but British growing up, or like they would have been more of a household name. And then I think like England, their album sales, or America, their album sales were like pretty bad. And there's like typical, well, they were like any other quote unquote like college rock band or whatever.
England's always better about that kind of shit.
Yeah.
Like I think I'm pretty sure that this is true. This fact that I heard somewhere that Oh Superman by Laurie Anderson. I don't know if you're familiar with that track. It's sort of like it's a really cool song, but it's it's very experimental, only borderline pop music song. But I think that went to #1 in England.
Wow. That's funny.
I think we may have to double check that, but I think that it did. I mean, England is always like they got on the Strokes bandwagon first. Hendrix. Yeah, Hendrix. That's where Hendrix broke. You know, like. I don't know. They're a little bit cooler about some musical things.
Is it because of the way they critique and evaluate music, and the way that because I mean, I don't know how the music like top lists work. Like on New York Times bestsellers for books, it's sort of like whatever publisher gets most distributed is the one whose book is going to be at the top. So like, what billboards you, what puts you up there?
Smaller.
Right.
That might have something to do
I mean, it's also like all white people, basically, which probably has like a big thing to do about it.
Yeah, the different demographic, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That said, I don't know. I've never even been to England. I don't know how their music industry works, but
yeah,
I assume.
But you do hear that a lot about like indie bands or alternative bands, like sort of being big in England and
is the way radio was being perceived and like, was there just more radio then there? And
I just think the taste is different. Sort of.
Yeah,
I think it's just a different taste.
I guess so.
The kind of stuff they were DJing and presenting was different.
I don't know. It's just like the bands that like tend to get big there. I mean, if you think about bands like the Horrors or like earlier like the Libertines, like bands that were like massive in England.
Right. But someone has to like promote or at least discover and distribute them, right? Like so there has to be like some means of like, hey, you know, this DJ is selective and taste and can play what he wants. If he has that freedom and he's got that block and he's making these picks, is that driving things? Whereas in the US it's dictated more. I don't know. I guess that's my question mark. I don't know too much about.
Well, I mean, it's a lot of BBC, but I don't know how BBC works really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There also just might be so many more American artists at any given time that it's just harder to like kind of either break through or then stay on top unless you yourself are a very broad appealing artist. You know, like Michael Jackson. Right. Michael Jackson's not gonna like seem too weird or well, in person he will, but his music won't seem like it was not going to rub anyone the wrong way.
Although, if you think about it, I mean, he was one of like the first African-American artists on MTV.
True,
There are plenty of people he was rubbing the wrong way at a certain point in time. It's just his music has kind of been like become like the gold standard of like sort of quintessential,
like Madonna. Like like Madonna is well, who also can like offend, but I think music, like strictly musically, it's like so many people are gonna clearly like that. You know, it requires no like entry point or you don't. Yeah, I don't know.
There's no challenge.
Right, which is fine. That's not at all a
Musically,
discredit.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean a lot of like the pop, but I feel like always the thing about, not always, but a lot of the thing about pop acts that makes them controversial is their presentation outside the music.
Right.
Because the music's always just about like moving units, sort of, and moving butts, and like, you know,
Right.
you dance and you buy the record or whatever, you go to the show. It's the image that accompanies it that like.
Yeah, and I think the Pixies probably like totally, what they did probably screw up is, well, not screw up even because it wasn't their fault, but they were like very schlubby looking, like college kids from America who hated music videos at a time when it was like the best time to be making music videos.
Yeah.
For promotion, and I think they were a pretty good live act, but I could be wrong, but maybe they were sloppy in the beginning. But yeah, I don't know. So I feel like the Pixies also didn't like. It's not like getting famous was super important to them. I think, but I don't know.
Speculation.
So just kind of getting back to this track specifically, do you think this is a good entry track? Like if you were to say like, hey, like if, or is it more this album? Like this is.
It depends who the person is, because as I think that we've just like discussed earlier, like going into Pixies, I was curious about their weirder, like noisier, more aggressive side, and I heard "Here Comes Your Man" or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't like the song. This is not what I was supposed to be getting into. And then I would later hear. I also just in general with Doolittle, the album, a lot of people hate the production of that album. They think the producer was like kind of an idiot and or just like totally gave him like an inappropriate treatment. But that's a whole other story. So I think if you're going into it like I want to hear like that more aggressive, weirder, noisier side, Bone Machine's probably like really good. I mean, Where's My Mind's also really good for that. But yeah, I would say if you're like thinking of them as more of what's like a edgier REM or something like that, then may I give them Doolittle, because Doolittle has great songs and it sounds very clean and it sounds like a U2 album sort of in terms of how it's mixed and everything. So yeah, I don't know what you thought about that, Parker.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's the same. It really depends on like who your audience is. I think that they have some songs that are pretty universal, have some appeal for everyone.
Yeah, like Wave of Mutilation.
Yeah, like
it
who can't
could totally be like a Green Day or Third Eye Blind song. Like it could have been absolutely huge
if it didn't have those beautiful lyrics.
Yeah,
you know, yeah. That's what every other one. Fucks
What's
up.
funny is like a song like "Where's My Mind" then has weirdly become more popular. You know, years after it was released. Like it was on Fight Club credits or whatever at the end, and I just remember like I would listen to Pixies all the time in high school to the to my sister's despair, who had to, like, so I was driving her to school all the time. And she always hated them. And then like one day, like after college even, she was like, I think she had posted like the song on Facebook or something. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe you like posted Pixies after complaining about them so much. And she was like, yeah, well, whatever. I like it now. I like this song. I think she had seen Fight Club recently or something, or I don't even know what.
That scene is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Whatever. I gave my little brother so much shit about listening to Kanye West when he came out, because I was like, this isn't like edgy rock. This is like Jesus Walks. What kind of crap is this? And I fucking love Kanye West now. So
yeah,
people change.
People change. That's what we learn here.
Yeah.
New. They
What's
become
new?
new.
Everybody,
they become new to themselves.
That's right. They refresh every 10 years, every cell in their body. So, I mean, it's unfortunate that we lost Willem, but I just kind of want to, I want to thank you guys for coming in for this stuff.
Thanks for
any
having
last
us.
thoughts on Pixies or Mr. Dream before we...
I like both of them.
All right.
Thank you.
So you guys have, just real quick, you guys have toured regularly, and you're going to probably, when you get your next album, have you been kind of following that pattern?
We're thinking about it. We're sort of having similar to the discussion that Willem had a few weeks ago on previous episodes. We're trying to just figure out how to make sense playing live and touring, vis-a-vis like having a career and like not having to be on the road all the time. So we'll sort of figure it out. It's all a little TBD right now, but yeah, the album will definitely be out. Not gonna make any promises, but I think in February or March,
like late winter.
Cool.
2014.
So, definitely.
Cool. And I guess one kind of thing too is that what's interesting and a good thing is you guys are all, this is another, beyond just being three-piece, you guys are each in sort of varied stages of being a band. So like Willem was sort of, he just wrapped up a band, had tours under his belt, had some time, and sort of is in another phase of his career. You, Parker, are sort of in that earlier phase where you're like a bit younger, kind of getting rolling or whatever. I mean, not that you guys haven't, your guys' bands are pretty similar in length right now, relatively.
Yeah.
Right.
So, about 4, you've got maybe 5 or 6 years, maybe.
Yeah.
So, it's just sort of interesting that sort of like different, not generational, but, things move quickly now, and generations are measured in years or something.
Yeah.
But it's sort of unique to see 3 different, bands and 3 different levels of
Of
career.
I think like bands are constantly probably having more, so I'm like learning this more and more as I like meet more people in bands and just get older. But like any band is always constantly like in this state of flux, because there's never like a band that's like, oh, we can just keep making the same album 6 times and it'll work every time or something like that. I mean, if you're like Tom Petty, you can do that or something. But I don't. A lot of bands and like very famous band. I mean, I was reading about like U2, for example, and making Hartong Baby, which was like for them an incredibly sharp left turn, even though now that album sounds like just like a typical pop album. But for them, they're like, yeah, we like really don't want to just keep playing these epic stadium rock songs. We want to like try electronic stuff. We want to try different song structures or something, and when strange like vocal effects and things like that. And you always have to be asking yourself that sort of question of like, how should we change? How should we change like in our operations? How should we change stylistically? And I think that's just always good to keep in mind, and not think that there must be something wrong with your band because you have to like, always think about these sort of things and consider them.
All right. And so well, again, thanks for the picks, Adam. Thanks for bringing a song to the table and for the Pixies thing. And we'll wrap up. So again, it was Mr. Dream track. And
it was Fringy Slider by Mr. Dream, and
from an upcoming release.
Off the upcoming The Ultimate in Luxury, out on God Mode Records in hopefully February 2014. And then my inspirational song was Bone Machine by Pixies.
Off of Surfer Rosa, 1988.
Yeah, and 4AD Records.
Your bones got a little machine.
Answers such as hard work. Years ago, the Holy
Feel I'm alone in this whole of existence. I know it takes time, but I'm losing my persistence. The distance is too far to fetch, so I sketch on pages and hope this uncatch.
Everybody, thanks for listening to another episode of the New to You show. This sort of puts a bookend on our musicians doing each other with music for another segment.
Notes to you.
So I want to, even though he had to leave early, I want to thank Willem again. You can find his band on Breaking Laces, and you can probably find more about his music writing online as well. So with me also was
Parker Silzer of the band Slonk Tonkerson.
All right, and do you have a Twitter or anything?
I mean, you can just Google Slonk Tonkerson and find all the various platforms. Like they're maintained in various levels of enthusiasm. They're all there though. They're all there.
And Adam.
Cool, and I'm Adam Moerder of the band Mr. Dream. You can look up Mr. Dream stuff on mrdreamland.us. And you can learn about me on adammoerder.com. That's AdamMoerder.com.
All right. Thanks again, guys. This was great to have you on.
Thank you.
For listeners, if you guys want to react, if there are any listeners out there, you can hit us on Twitter at New to You Show, or you can respond on the blog newtoyoushow.com. We'll be posting these hopefully before the year is up. And thanks again, everybody. It may not be new, but hopefully it was new to you. And
pitiful life is all about the music. This 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 pitiful life is all about the music.
With him together forever, without the limitation of time ever again. So the second coming of the Lord is not dead. They're two separate.